Welcome to Perspectives El Paso. I'm Professor Leon Blevins, Professor of Government at El Paso Community College. A quick note of history. In the late 1970s, I met with the college president at our college and the facilities planner about the opening of the first campus at the community college. I urged these people to put in a number of curb cuts, convenient space in unloading and loading near the elevator, and I also urged them to put one electric door in each of the major buildings because of my previous experience with handicapped students who were wheelchair bound. As it turned out, they did not do those things, but later I met a young man in my class named Richard Cardinal, and he and I organized a group of wheelchair bound people at our campus and lobbied and got some electric doors put in. Later I had a student named Tom Pugh, and he was very active in working to get handicapped lifts and things of that nature with the city buses and better routes for the handicapped. I say that to introduce this. Just recently, here we are in April of 2009, I was at the intersection of Sunmount and Edison, and there sat Tom Pugh in a wheelchair along with a number of other people, and two women standing behind these people that were in their wheelchairs. Sandra Geers, I was introduced to, and a young lady named Bianca.
Brianna Stone.
Oh, is it Brianna?
Brianna
Stone.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't catch the name real well that day. So Brianna. I invited Sandra to be on the program and maybe bring Brianna or someone else, perhaps someone in a wheelchair. And we had someone lined up, but he had to drop out for health reasons today. So we have Diana Melendez, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So these are our guests today, and they are with the Paso del Norte Civil Rights Project. Sandra and Diana, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
It's nice to be here.
Okay, Sandra, tell us about this. Why were you demonstrating at that intersection the other day with these people that you work with?
To show our support through the Paso del Norte Civil Rights Project, we advocate rights for people for social, racial, and economic justice. So they had mentioned their protest, and we felt it right and our duty to be there to support them.
And they were protesting the intersection there because of its poor design, right there at the intersection with the Silla Vista bus stop.
Yes.
Okay, the
Yes,
bus
sir.
terminal that
Yes,
is
sir.
there.
It's very dangerous. Actually, there's a ramp from the bus stop onto the street, but between the street and the sidewalk on Walmart, there's nothing. So you have people in wheelchairs or possibly walkers or strollers who are on the street.
And would you believe that on April the 21st, I had been to Sam's Club to get some film developed, and I'm leaving and I'm coming up that area toward the bus stop. And just a few weeks ago, I'd started taking pictures of people walking in the street, able-bodied people walking in the street there because of the poor design, lack of sidewalks, lack of ramps and things. And so this particular day, I'm coming up and I see your group. And there is, I get out to take some pictures, and Tom Pugh starts yelling at me, Blevins, and some of the other students who recognize me. Then I introduce myself to you, Sandra, and to your associate was there that day. And this is where this began. I invited you to be on the show to talk about civil rights and justice, especially for the handicapped. And so we're glad that you were able to be with us today and talk about this.
Yes, sir.
Name some other projects that you have going, and then we're going to ask Diana about some of the work that she does with you. Where are some other places or projects you've done?
Well, we try to help people lead independent lives, and certainly we work a lot with the ADA, American with Disabilities Act. And we have had a number of cases around El Paso dealing with restaurants where the restrooms don't have any access for handicapped people or the doors are too hard to open. So we have worked on those cases, and we have helped people who frequent those places and who are disabled to be able to go to those places because they have a right just to enjoy restaurants and shops and other places just as much as other people without disabilities. And
you mentioned the ADA, Americans with Disability Act. Now, I remember Tom Pugh was lobbying on behalf of that, the federal piece of legislation years ago. Okay, Diana, tell us about what part of this Civil Rights Project you work with.
Okay, well, I work with the Violence Against Women Act program, which is a program designed for undocumented victims of domestic violence, because many times, as we have seen, people who are married, undocumented victims of domestic violence who are married to a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident of the United States are especially subjected to a different type of domestic violence, or just they are further victimized because of their legal status here in the United States. Their husband or wife usually uses this as a form of controlling them.
How do you come in contact with them? Is through the police department? Who puts them in contact with you so you can work with them?
We have several agencies that refer them to us. A lot of the times it's shelters in the area. We also work with rural areas in Texas, so we have contacts out in shelters in those rural areas. Also police department, sheriffs, the county attorney's office as well.
You go to workshops and things of this nature to learn how to work with this particular group?
Right, we go to domestic violence workshops. We also focus a lot on, the petition is for immigration benefits, so we go to a lot of workshops on immigration law.
Do you help them to work toward getting citizenship?
We help them, yes, once their VAWA petition is approved, immediately they can apply for the work permit. Once the work permit, once they have their work permit, depending whether they're married to a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident, they can immediately apply for their residency.
Sandra, what about your staff? She's on your staff?
Yes.
Okay, and Bianca is on your staff?
Brianna Stone is actually the director.
Brianna, I can't get the name right. Brianna.
Brianna, she's the director.
Okay.
Yes.
And so how many do you have working on this civil rights project?
Right now there's 5 of us, permanent staff in the office.
And the funding is from?
It's from different grants. It's from the Texas Access to Justice Foundation, and
The VAWA has some other grants
The
as well,
Attorney
right?
General's office and other private grants as well.
Do you help write grants? Do you do the work to try to get grants for your organization, or do you have someone else that's doing that?
we apply. Sometimes we apply for them.
And we also have a staff development person in our office in Austin who also focuses a little bit more on the grants.
Let's go back to the ones that are wheelchair bound. What kind of services do you try to help them to get? Do you help them work through different government agencies for services that can help them, Veterans Administration services, or any of those kind of things? What do you do besides advocating for changes to make life easier for them?
Well, we provide free legal services for them. That is what we do. So when they have a case, then they can call our office, and we review the case, and then at that point determine whether we can take the case or not. So we provide the free legal services for a restaurant or a business or a place that is frequented by people with disabilities, and we help them out in that sense.
Well, we don't want to get into specifics,
Right.
but I suspect that sometimes you're not very welcome by some of these organizations when you're
Yes.
saying, provide these people these civil rights that they have under the law.
Yes.
And some groups are saying, and organizations saying, they don't want to do those things. So you actually have some cases that go to court?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And we have won the majority of the cases.
You have won the majority of the
Paso,
cases
yes.
that you've taken with these people.
Yes.
Makes
Yes,
you
we
feel good?
Wonderful, because unless you have a disability, it's very hard to understand, or you take for
Yes.
granted, going in shopping or eating out or different things that we do every day.
Right.
I mean, you really don't know until you really work up close with somebody that has a disability, or you have a relative, or you yourself eventually. And you never know. One of us, some of us have accidents, or
Right.
we get a lot older and then we start, using wheelchairs or walkers, and then we get to the point to where we know how important it is.
Well, I believe you asked me on the street, and that's the reason it's hard to remember the names. I'm meeting people
Right.
on the street there. You asked me on the street how I got interested in this particular
Yes.
area of disabilities, and I told you it had to do with teaching at West Texas State University and Texas Tech, where there were a lot of stairs for people to work with and try to get in, and we actually were carrying people upstairs to get them into the classrooms in some of the buildings. And I was sensitized that by a man who he and his daughter were in my classes, and her name was Debbie Giles, and she helped start the Little People of America organization. And she commented the fact that we didn't understand it because we weren't working at her level. She's sitting in this chair all the time, rolling around, and unless we have that experience, we don't know what it's about. And then when I came to teach here in 1972, there were some of our students coming back from the war in Vietnam, and some of them were in wheelchairs, and they needed curb cuts. They needed close access to the elevator for loading and unloading. They needed doors that were not so heavy so they would be able to open the doors. That's what Richard Cardinal ran into and was presenting in my class. Mr. Blevins, I'm always late because I can't open the doors and get in. I have to wait for people to come and open the door so I can get in the building. So these are the kind of things we're working with.
And we do that kind of research where we actually do go to the facilities and we have a gauge to measure if we can push the door. So we do a lot of research before we take a case.
Well, it'd be fascinating to follow you around for a week and see what you do.
I will let you know.
Okay, I'd like to do that sometime when I'm not teaching so much and doing shows. Okay, let's get back to I did a program recently about domestic violence, and I've had it run a couple of times because it's been a big problem here lately in the El Paso, nationwide for that matter, and economically. Diana, what about that? This economic crisis we're in right now in 2009, is that impacting these immigrants? And are you seeing more domestic violence, you think, because of the stress and tension caused by their job situations?
Yes, of course. Primarily for these undocumented victims, they can't work legally here in the United States, so they have to depend even more on their spouse. A lot of these victims also come from from Mexico, and they don't have any family here in the United States, and they don't know where they can turn to for help, or they are afraid to go to someone for help because they think that someone will report them to immigration because they also don't know who to trust. So these victims are forced to stay in this relationship longer, not only for themselves, but primarily because of their children. They're worried for their children.
Some of my students, when I ask, do illegal or undocumented people in our society have rights? And some of them will say, no, they don't have rights. I say, no, wait a minute, think about that. They have a right not to be beat up by the police. They have a right to travel. They have a variety of rights. Now, they don't have all the same rights as a citizen, but they do have rights. See, another one that's kind of a misconception, I'll say, do illegal aliens or undocumented workers pay taxes? And someone said, no, they don't pay taxes. I said, wait a minute, they pay sales taxes every time they go through the checkout center. Their rent goes up if the property taxes go up. So these people have rights.
Of course.
Including the women that you're working with. They have rights. They have a right not to be beat up.
Right.
They have a right to access to fair trial with regard to the person if that person goes to trial. They have a right to certain services. Tell us some of the services that some of these women have.
Well, as you say, every person that steps into the United States has rights. So they have, as you said, they have right to representation. They have, if they ever get stopped by a police, they don't need to answer all their questions. They have a right to remain silent. They have a right to an attorney. Every person that steps in the United States has the same rights as anybody else.
Okay, right. We want to give you a chance to put up a telephone number or perhaps a website or both before this program is over. Sandra, you want to do that for us? Give us a telephone number of your office.
The number is 532-3799.
Okay.
And you can call either extension 10, which is a general office number, or my extension is 11.
Okay. And that's area code 915, of
Yes,
course.
sir.
So we'll get that
Yes.
number up there. That's all you want to put up? You don't need to put up a website?
Well, we could put Sandra at TexasCivilRightsProject.com, .org, and that is my website, and I will gladly answer all emails
Okay,
I
good.
get.
Well, that's what we're going to do, because sometimes we're doing these programs, it's about the community, perspectives in the community. It's not about me, it's really about your programs, and we want people to be aware of these and be able to contact you with regard to them. If there's a case of domestic violence, they can.
Well, our website is also available in Spanish and Korean, I believe, and it's www.texascivilrightsproject.org.
Okay, say it again.
www.texascivilrightsproject.org.
Okay, good, because that could become very important in this particular time, yes. Okay, well, I know we're going back and forth on these two cases, but it's all about civil rights. Now, we have the domestic violence issue. You have the disabled, especially those in wheelchair. What other categories do you operate of?
Well, I also coordinate a parenting order legal clinic, which is the second Tuesday of every month here in El Paso. And we have a pro bono attorney on staff, which means that he or she doesn't get paid for services, but provides information in regards to child custody and visitation and how to modify court orders. And we also have a lawyer from the Attorney General's office providing information on child support. And these services are free for the community, and it helps people understand their situation in regards to children and custody a little bit better. And the idea, of course, is to give people other options, make them aware that there are other options besides going to court and spending huge amounts of fees on court services and attorney's fees, and also try to collect the amount of child support, so that to provide the single parents. As a lot of us know, it's very hard to be a single parent sometimes, especially in these economic times. So that would also help.
Now, do you have packets of information for these different categories? When someone comes in, you have it ready to go, and you sit down and walk them through the packets?
Yes, sir. Yes, at the Parenting Order Legal Clinic, I provide a folder, and also in the office, we do have brochures and flyers for each one of our programs that are ready. And if somebody needs that information, we can gladly provide that as well.
Tell me about some success stories. People you saw their lives change, they grab you and they hug you and they praise you and say, oh, thank you for helping me, okay?
Okay, sure. We actually just had one of our clients recently become a lawful permanent resident, and this was actually one of the very first cases we had in El Paso. She led a life of terrible domestic abuse, and she finally, once she came to our office, she finally had the courage to leave her abuser. She went through the process, she got her work permit, and then finally she applied for her residency, which she just got recently last year, November 2008. And now last time we talked to her, she bought a car, and she is now in the process of buying her own home.
Oh, that is a success story.
Yes, that is a success
Okay, let's come back over to your side of the story. You don't have to name names if you don't want to, but
Okay.
some success stories, how things turn out. Maybe some you didn't think were going to turn out so well.
Well, we did have a restaurant. It's a large restaurant in El Paso, and it's been here for several years. And somebody wasn't able to have access to the restroom, so we took the case and we won it. We litigated and won. And so now there's access, and of course the restaurant was very amiable. It was a very amiable outcome, like you can say. But it was important for the people that were going there. And so we were able to win that case.
And just that nudge of your organization was able, and they would be willing to say, okay, we're glad we did this, we're glad you called it to our attention and worked us through this as an issue.
Because it's just another place, that they're able to go. And like I said, we take it for granted, and I had been there and I never really thought about that until it was brought to our attention. And so we're very happy that now, they can go there.
Well, it took a while for some of us lobbying to get electric doors at Valle Verde campus. And eventually, that was buildings A and C and the gymnasium. And then eventually, when they built the building they call Building B, they built it with easy access to the restrooms, don't even have doors on the restrooms. They can just find their way around the barricades there. And then some other things that they did there, which made it much better for the, quote, handicapped or the disabled. And so those are success stories when you see that, even in the construction of new buildings and new campuses when they were building other campuses. Of course, now you have the ADA that says they have to do these things. It's not just a matter of them accepting it.
Exactly.
They have to do this. And that makes a big difference when you can hold that over them.
Yes, it does.
Do you, when you send out a letter to one of these, say, restaurants or associations or something, I know your tone is very good, but you specifically mention the law when you're saying that we have a situation that's developed here, that people are coming to us, and we need to remind you of this law.
Yes, and of course we try to settle it, without actually going into a lot of litigations. But yes, we do send out a letter making them aware of the situation and also the kind of law that is being violated.
Have you had any that really fought against you? That said, no, we're not going to do this, we don't want to do this?
Not really. We've just had situations where they say, well, because it's a historical building, which still, that's always been an argument. But as long as they're able to, remodel it or re-engineer it, all buildings basically can be accessible to people. To people with
just recently, I had Troy Ainsworth on one of the shows, and he is a historic preservation officer for El Paso. And so he and others in that area, they are concerned about maintaining the historic view of that location, but at the same time, they're willing to work in our modern society. And it seems like more and more people are being handicapped. More and more people are in wheelchairs because of auto accidents and other things that are happening, spinal cord injuries, and so there's a great need there.
Yes.
Diana, back to you then. Let's give you a chance. Have you said some of them have been terribly, terribly abused. Have you had some that you had to deal with in the hospital, the medical situation, and work them through those kind of situations?
When they come to our offices, they generally already have had services. Like if they needed to go to a hospital or needed to call a police officer, they come to us after that because these are the agencies that refer them to us. So we just, if there is a client that comes to us and, for example, is depressed or is having anxiety, then we do refer them to clinics and things like that.
And so you help some of them find clinics and perhaps even doctors that can work with them?
Right, exactly. Doctors at low cost because obviously they don't have chance to work. They don't have the money. We help them look for shelters as well.
What about the children? Their children working in the school. I know a number of years ago I was invited to do a program for children of illegals who had been separated from their children. And a number of children are housed here in El Paso at a specific location, and they don't know where their parents are. And in some of those cases, I'm sure you have some traumatized women who are concerned about their children and what's happened to them, or if they're having to be put in some kind of child protective care while you're working with them to go through that.
Yes, a lot of the women, that's their biggest fear because their spouses threaten them and taking away their children. So that's their biggest fear. And of course, like we mentioned before, parents, whether they're undocumented or not, have the same rights over the children as somebody who is documented. So we refer them as well to attorneys who may be able to take a pro bono case, or attorneys at low cost that may help with child custody or child support, things like that.
Yeah, and some of it's emotional abuse without necessarily being violent physical abuse of the person, or threats of taking the children away and not letting her see them again, or her being deported. That's a big one that's hanging over someone like that.
Yes, that's the biggest one, actually.
That's the biggest one. She might get deported and never see her children again.
Right.
And in some cases, the children have been born here and they're American citizens. And then you run into that. Your lawyers, pro bono or low cost, they help them work through that particular situation.
Right. As soon as they come into our office, a lot of the times we see a lot of collaboration here in El Paso, fortunately, with agencies such as Border Patrol, because many of the times when Border Patrol encounters a domestic violence victim and they see that they could possibly qualify in having a case with us, instead of deporting them or detaining them, they refer them to us instead.
Now you mentioned collaboration. I like in my shows to talk about collaboration and interaction with other organizations. Sandra, what about this? With your organization and others you collaborate with, you collaborate with county attorney, you have to deal with county attorney, or any of these?
Collaborate with all other lawyers and organizations, or like ADAPT and VOLAR, but yes, whenever we can, yes.
Now you mentioned ADAPT. ADAPT is what? Texas Access, you mentioned something about this. What are these organizations?
They're organizations for people with disabilities, and they have their meetings, and of course they're very proactive in the community as far as trying to get access and to different facilities that might not otherwise. They provide services for people with disabilities targeted to them.
And these are statewide organizations?
Those are in El Paso.
These are basically local organizations that we're talking about. Okay. Well, this is your program. I want to give you a chance to any things that I didn't ask you about, or something that you'd like to share with the viewing audience, because our time is going pretty fast. We have a few more minutes left. And so anything that I've overlooked that you'd like to share with our audience. You first, Sandra.
Well, we're also going to start an economic justice program, starting, I believe, it's going to be like in July, June or July. And that is gonna, we have a lawyer, a young lawyer coming in also and helping us start that program. And it's basically recovering lost wages. And since in the El Paso community, we do have a lot of immigrant workers. And sometimes, I guess due to a language barrier or not understanding their rights as well, sometimes they might work 50, 60 hours without getting paid. And they really are so afraid of being deported, or have other types of fears that they really cannot, fight back and get their wages. So we're trying to start that program, like I mentioned, like in June or July.
So an economic justice
justice program, yes.
Okay. And what about your situation?
Well, I guess what I would just want to mention is that in the VAWA program, we also work with victims of crime, we can file a U visa petition for them, which is a visa designed especially for undocumented victims of crime so that they wouldn't be afraid to report these crimes. So if an undocumented victim of a crime reports this crime and they collaborate with law enforcement agencies with the investigation of the case, and they can qualify potentially for a visa to stay here in the United States.
How long have you been working the program, Diana?
I worked in the Austin office for about a year, and then I will be completing my second year here in El Paso.
Okay. And what about you, Sandra? How long have you been with this program?
A year total. I started as a volunteer last April, and I became a permanent staff member in August, the beginning of August.
Was your background and training in social work?
No.
What was your educational and background training before you moved over to this area?
Business administration and also computer-aided design and manufacturing. So it was very different from what I do right now. But I became very, very interested in social justice. So I applied as a volunteer to try and learn more since I didn't have a background in it. And in August, I was hired. And I love working there. I love the staff. And I really believe in the programs, and I think we're making a difference in El Paso. We are the only exclusive civil rights office in El Paso. Other attorneys work with civil rights, of course, but we are the only office dedicated exclusively to that. So I'm very proud to be part of that team.
Oh, you deserve to be proud of that.
Yes.
What about your background?
Well, I graduated from UT Austin with a degree in psychology and Mexican American studies, and so I was very an advocate for women's rights in college. So when this opportunity arose in Austin, I decided to take it, even though this was in my area of expertise. And I was especially happy that there was a position open here in El Paso because I grew up here.
I remember when I started teaching political science or government. My first full-time job was 1963. And people asked me about my viewpoint in life, and at some point I began to say, I'm a feminist. You're a feminist? I said, yes, I'm a male feminist because I believe women should be treated just like any man should be treated and paid equal pay for equal work and should not be sexually harassed and all of these kind of things. That we males also have an interest in how the handicapped are treated and how women are treated. We the able-bodied, how are handicapped treated. I want to treat others as I want to be treated. Do unto others as you'd have them do to you. So I think this is the foundation of all of this that we're looking at today about civil rights. Well, it's been great discussing these issues with these two special guests, with Diana and with Sandra. Glad that you came today.
Thank you.
And I want all of you to tune in once again and watch us when we have other programs and very interesting guests on Perspectives El Paso. I'm Leon Blevins. Watch us again sometime.